Music theory is a key to conscious song listening. Let's get acquainted with such terms as tone, timbre, sound, note, and pitch. As you might have learned during physics lessons, the sound is a wave that travels through some physical matter like water and air. Sound possesses such characteristics as frequency, which is the number of waves generated in 1 second. Sound frequency borne by some musical instrument or a person's vocal cords is called pitch. The higher the frequency, the higher the pitch or sound of particular objects. Vice versa, the lower the frequency, the lower the pitch. People divided specific pitches into categories and called them notes. Each note has unique characteristics and is assigned to a certain letter from A to G. However, the same note can sound differently if produced by various objects. It will still have the same pitch, but our perception of this note will change. For example, the same note played on a piano and on the guitar will have the same frequency, but its sound will vary. This phenomenon is called timbre. We can also call it tone. People frequently confuse tone with different terms because it is synonymous with some of them. We can even call a note a tone. But actually, people can hear a pure note only from a digital resource and in an isolated room. The notes we hear from musical instruments include different frequencies that our brains recognize as roughly one frequency. It is miraculous how strict physics rules turn into creative and harmonic music theory. Art is indeed ubiquitous. Understanding music theory to express yourself properly through music and follow it while listening to your favorite composers is essential. You can compare music to language because it has different rules, exceptions, complications, and accents, notes played on different instruments. To learn something is to practice it, right? Music theory helps you become an active listener who recognizes the harmony of the melody and understands its beauty and value. If you want to listen to music consciously or get a good start on playing any musical instrument, this summary is perfect for you. Did you know? People's voices are also divided into timbres, such as soprano, alto, tenor, bass, and baritone. Key point 2. Each key on the keyboard has a name. The Western musical system presents 12 notes. A sharp equals B flat, B, C sharp equals D flat, D sharp equals E flat, E, F sharp equals G flat, G sharp equals A flat. To get a clearer picture of the further explanations, Google the image of the piano keyboard with the notes depicted on it. The symbol hashtag or pound is called sharp and means a particular note is raised. The symbol B is called flat and implies that the note is descended. A note's sharp is equal to the flat of the following note, meaning that C sharp is the same as D flat, and so on. But there are some exceptions in this system. You might have noticed that there are no sharps and flats between E and F, and B and C. Looking at a piano keyboard, you will see white and black keys. All black keys are the notes with sharps and flats. Music also has such notions as tone and semitone used as note descriptions. A semitone is an interval between each note, like between A and A sharp, B flat, or E and F. Tone is when two semitones are between the notes, like C sharp, D flat, between C and D. So you have to move from C to C sharp, D flat, and then from C sharp to D to make a tone. But the piano keyboard is quite long and usually comprises 88 keys, while we have 12 notes. Well, these notes repeat all the time, but depending on the direction we move across the keyboard, they sound either higher or lower. It is called a register, and each register contains 12 notes. An octave is simply the distance between one note and that same note repeated in the next higher or lower register on the frequency scale. Nicolas Carter. The octaves include all the notes inside them and differ by the register. Musicians usually place a number near the note's letter to specify in which register it is positioned. We use from 1 to 8 for this task. The interval between C1 and C2 is 1 octave, as well as the interval between A4 and A5, F5 and F6, and so on. The opening note of each register is C. On top of that, there is such a notion as intervals, which can be major, minor, and perfect. Let's take note C and move around it. The note E would be major third above C, because if you count from C to E, including C, there will be 3 white keys. F sharp, G flat, is a minor fifth above C. In this case, we count the semitone, a black key, as well as the white keys. Perfect is an interval that has a consonant sound of the notes. It is easier to understand music theory on the piano keyboard than on guitar strings. Key point 3. Music has its formulas. Music theory also has a notion of scales, the range of notes that create a harmonic melody. A principal scale is called a chromatic scale. It includes all notes played in any octave. On a chromatic scale, you play by semitones, from C to C sharp, D flat, from C sharp, D flat to D, from D to D sharp, E flat, from D sharp, E flat to E, and so on. The chromatic scale can be divided into other types, pentatonic and diatonic. The pentatonic scale includes variations of 5 notes and can be either major or minor. The diatonic scale consists of variations of 7 notes, and its mood can also be minor or major. For instance, blues songs are minor, while many pop songs are major. With the help of the pentatonic scale, the musicians create different melodies using various sets of notes. The first note you use in the scale is called the root. When one changes a root, one must rearrange other notes to make a harmonic song. Such rearrangement is called a mode. To create a major diatonic scale, they use the formula TTS, TTTS, or tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. The scale will be major if one plays using the formula, using each of the 12 notes as a root in turns. For example, if your root note is A, you step 2 semitones away from it, or a whole tone, and play the note B. Then, 1 tone away from B, we move to C sharp. Semitone from C sharp will be a D, and so on. It's easier to understand the scales by opening an online piano keyboard and trying to follow the formula, starting with different root notes. The minor diatonic scale is considered a 6th mode of the major one. If the major scale starts with C, it would be C, D, E, F, G, A, B. We take its 6th note, which is A, and create a minor scale following this formula. T, S, T, T, S, T, T. You can take either note as a root to make a major scale. Let it be F. The 6th note of the F major scale will be E. Then the E minor scale will be E, T, F sharp, S, G, T, A, T, B, S, C, T, D, T, E. You can check how the sound changes. The major scales have a more positive mood, while the minor ones are melancholic. Key point 4. Turning major into minor. Musicians use relative modes to expand the number of chords they can use and diversify the melody. As mentioned before, A minor is created from the C major. Hence, they contain the same notes. Their difference is at the root note. It is an example of a relative mode, where the notes are identical, but the beginning of the scale differs. The modes have tonal centers, the core of the melody a person creates. In addition to the minor scale, musicians distinguish a slightly different harmonic minor scale. Its peculiarity is that the 7th note is moved 1 semitone higher. This scale has a magnetic influence on the listeners, but some musicians still need to be more satisfied with its sound. Many people prefer a more outstanding melodic minor scale. Its main feature is that while playing in the descending order, it sounds like a minor scale, but once turned into an ascending order, its sixth note moves by a semitone up. Keys are not merely the mechanical parts of a piano. We can call notes keys. In these terms, a key is the center of any composition. If you understand the song's key, it will be easier to know within which scale it is played. It works for most blues, pop, and rock pieces. But things get more complicated with jazz. In this genre, the musicians switch from one tonal center to another, using numerous scales even if the song is played in one key. Knowing which scale a person wants to use for the composition, one can determine flat and sharp notes, named a key signature. For example, you might have seen this signature on the piano notes where sharps and flats are put near a treble clef. But songs don't consist of separate notes played independently. If you use more than one note simultaneously, you create a chord. Harmonically sounding chords are composed of notes from one scale. There is a specific number of chords in each scale. Usually, the chords include 3 notes which are played at intervals of thirds. For instance, taking a C major scale, we create the lovely chord C, E, G. Musicians also use the intervals of fourth and fifth, which are rare. We can make a nice chord using intervals of fourth and thirds in a C major scale, which is C, F, A. Music is a place for freeing your fantasy and creating something unique. Key point 5. Chords and all that jazz. The chords differ by the number of notes in them. Traditionally, musicians use either 4, 3, or 2 notes to form a chord. People who play jazz may add one more note to the 4-note chords. The chords containing 2 notes are called dyads, 3 notes, triads, and 4, seventh chords. All chords have specific qualities that convey a certain mood and influence listeners differently. The core quality characterizes whether the chord is major or minor. You can effortlessly hear the difference between them. Minor chords sound melancholic, while major chords are more joyful. To create a major triad, choose the root note. Count 4 semitones higher for the second note, major third, and move 3 semitones higher from major third to obtain the chord's last note, perfect fifth. The G major triad would include G, B, and D. The E major triad would be composed of E, G sharp, A flat, and B. As for the minor triads, we only change the central note by flattening it. So instead of using a major third, we would replace it with a minor third. The difference between major third and minor third is in 1 semitone. We take away a semitone from major third. Let's make the G minor chord. We take the root note, G, then add a minor third, B minus 1 semitone, B flat, A sharp, and leave the D as in the G major. To form a quadad or a 7th chord, you need to add either major 7th or minor 7th, depending on the mood you need to create. A major 7th chord will include the root note, followed by a major 3rd, then a perfect 5th, and finally a major 7th. Let's make a charming, jazz-sounding 7th chord. Take A as a root, then add C sharp, D flat, E, and G sharp, A flat. A minor 7th will include 3 first notes with the same formula as a minor triad, and an additional minor 7th at the end. If we use the same root note as before, we will get a chord A, C, E flat, D sharp, and G flat, F sharp. When in low spirits, you can search for music created in a major mood to cheer yourself up. Key point 6. You've got the rhythm. If you want to become a musician or be in tune with the composition you listen to, one of the most crucial things to practice is rhythm. It will be quite challenging to develop a sense of rhythm by listening to music only, so it's better to practice as much as you can. You can seek help from a professional musician who will explain all the nuances and indicate the mistakes. If you don't have finances for a tutor, you can record your playing and track the moments when you fall out of the steady beat. Another useful way to learn the rhythm is to purchase a metronome and practice playing with it. A metronome is a device that generates clicks tuned in the rhythm you require. Both slow and fast playing is essential for practice, but a slow rhythm will help you develop an excellent technique so that your performance won't deteriorate during the quicker speed of play. You will also need to know the time of the composition, the number of beats played in certain intervals. Once you know about the time of piece, you need to know how to play it. Nicolas Carter. Listening to the piece in which the rhythm changes is more captivating. We can do so with the help of syncopation, playing some parts of the song or all composition off-beat. Musicians play faster or slower, add or retrieve notes in unexpected places, and revive the song. Another way to create a dynamic song is to use dissonance and consonance. The former is when the notes do not create a harmonic sound when played simultaneously, while the latter means that the notes sound pleasant. Such incompatibilities give birth to movement in the song. Suppose you want to hear an example of dissonance. In that case, the easiest way is to play two notes placed next to each other simultaneously, like C and D. However, dissonant sound sometimes means the composition will be distasteful. A professional composer can masterfully integrate dissonance in their pieces and delight the listener. Something that is a drawback creates a more outstanding masterpiece, whether it's a song, painting, or personality. Conclusion. Music isn't just about some flows of creativity that turn into beautiful compositions. Music is like math. You have to use different formulas to find a harmonic solution. But don't be scared of the seeming complexity of scales and chords. Once you start practicing, playing the instrument or listening to various pieces, you will easily navigate through the waves of notes. The most challenging task would be to understand jazz and blues music. They aren't conventional, and you'll be amazed by the variety of unusual turns that jazz musicians apply. You can start with the famous Ella Fitzgerald, Louis Armstrong, and Ann Peebles. Music theory allows people to understand the piece from the composer's perspective. Isn't it fascinating to get into a musician's head and realize why they used a certain chord or scale? While watching complex and beautifully filmed movies, a person develops a sense of composition. While listening to sophisticated pieces, one advances a sense of rhythm and recognition of many chords and notes. Practicing such active listening ensures a more profound mastering of playing the instrument. Music also reveals that each instrument has a distinct soul, which musicians call a timbre. The same song played on the piano and the guitar sounds similar but different simultaneously, not only because of the timbre, but because of the instrument's mood. A violin will sound more romantic, while the piano is more triumphant. You can choose the instrument that will fit you by listening attentively to whether its soul resonates with yours. Try this. 1. Open any piece of classical or jazz music and try to guess in which mood it is played, major or minor. 2. Use an online or physical instrument and play different scales to memorize all the notes. 3. Close your eyes. Push a random key on a piano or string on a musical instrument and try to guess which note you played.